Carol, if you can check attendance for us, please.
Yes, Lorraine Koss,
Here.
Charles Venuto,
Here.
John Lusnar,
Here.
Vinnie Toronto,
Here.
John Windsor,
Here.
David Lane,
Here.
Laura Lee Thompson, Stephanie Ely, Melissa Martin,
Here.
Courtney Barker, Todd Swingle,
Here.
Jay Moynihan,
Here.
Dennis Basile.
Here.
I believe we have a
Courtney
quorum.
is here.
Courtney is here?
Yeah, she is.
Okay. Then we have a quorum. And Terry Castro has to be excused.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'd like to get a motion to approve today's agenda, please.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, we got a second. All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda?
Aye.
Are there anybody opposed? Okay, very well. We need a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from last month's meeting?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Very well, okay. Good morning, Virginia.
Morning.
If you want to go ahead and get started with the monthly progress and fiscal reports, please.
Okay, so the big thing this month, as you all know, has been drafting the 2020 update proposal for the Save Our Indian River Lagoon project plan. In this year's update, we also went through a process of updating all of the stormwater modeling, trying to match up which areas of land drain through which outfalls in order to prioritize where would be the best project areas in the county for reducing stormwater load, and so that is incorporated into the draft plan. The Sykes Creek Zone N septic to sewer is all, the final permits are in, so we're preparing the bid documents for that. We have 10 county stormwater basin treatments that the bids were open, the pre-qualification meeting has occurred, and so those projects are being awarded to 2 different contractors. Cocoa Beach muck dredging phase 3 was completed. Sykes Creek muck dredging is currently, the bid is advertised right now. And then jumping down for video production, that the videos that Dylan Hansen had been doing for us in the past was awarded to 142 Productions in this competitive process, and we've had a kickoff meeting. Will be, if you haven't done your individual, meet who's on the COC interview, he will be contacting you to set up those appointments, and we'll get him started on covering some projects that are under construction. As for work underway, the Palm Bay North Regional Water Reclamation Facility, that work is also out to bid right now. The beaches leaking sewer laterals, 15 repairs have been completed. The Cone Road septic to sewer, 3 properties have connected to that new line. West Melbourne Sylvan Estates septic sewer construction has started, and the University of Central Florida, each month they're going out monitoring different oyster reefs and living shorelines. And the site that they visited this month, they observe very large recruitment and bridging of oysters between one bag and another, so beginning to form a solid block of a reef. So that's exciting progress. Flipping to the other side of the update presentations, this month, oyster restoration was the major topic at this month's or this quarter's Archie Carr working group meeting. Jenny Hansen presented, as well as Jake from the zoo, and someone from the Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge project. That was a very large oyster project, oyster restoration, or they were using oysters to provide a wave break and protection of our nation's first national wildlife refuge. And that work was begun in 2000, so there was 20 years of data and lessons learned from that. So very interesting presentations. And then I wanted to highlight the Lagoon Straight Talk event that is planned in Satellite Beach next week, January 22nd. And the Indian River Lagoon Symposium that will be at Harbor Ranch on February 13th and 14th. You have to register for that event. I think it's a $30 registration this year, 2 days of talks, the latest research and knowledge on the Indian River Lagoon. So very informative event. And then under volunteer participation opportunities, anybody who would like to help the zoo with some oyster monitoring of sites that they're not sites funded by the Save Our Indian River Lagoon tax, because we have a third-party university doing that monitoring, but for other sites, they use volunteers to assist with that monitoring. So that's taking place on January 25th. And there's a new program that the IFIS Extension Program, Holly Abeels is one of your speakers today, is providing training for horseshoe crab watch. And so we're looking forward to learning more about our horseshoe crab population in the lagoon. Next month at the February meeting, we are anticipating Dr. Sherry Brandt Williams from St. Johns River Water Management District to come present the ecological modeling that they've done following the modeling that Dr. Gary Zerillo at FIT did on the issue of the impact of causeways to circulation in the Banana River, and what sort of ecological improvements might be anticipated if those causeways or portions of those causeways were replaced with open spans. We also expect Dr. Drew Palmer from Florida Tech to come present the final piece of his muck research from Sykes Creek, where we were looking at chemical contaminants and biological viruses and pathogens in muck. And that's my monthly progress report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the progress report? I had a couple of questions. The Sykes Creek muck dredging phase 1 bid advertised, was that bid awarded at one point before the relocation of the spoil site?
It was bid out. There was an apparent low bidder. It was up, the way that bid process worked, it was up to the contractor to propose a dredge material management area. The area that they proposed was near the bottom of the bowl in North Merritt Island, where we already have flooding problems. And so that bid was rejected by the county commission and rewritten in such a way to avoid that problem on second go around.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to work underway this month. Third from the bottom, you have UCF showing large recruitment and bridging at one site. Do you know anything else about that, or is there somebody that can speak about that?
Jenny, you want to come? We get a monthly report from University of Central Florida, and it's 30 or 40 pages, and so yeah, we know a whole lot more, but I boiled it down to one bullet point.
Anytime I see large recruitment, those are two great words,
Yes.
So I want to know more.
Yes, there was a relatively large recruitment event this year. That was how they put in their executive summary. They saw enough recruits at that location that the overall average size of the reef actually was sort of drawn down a bit, which means that there's a really high number of recruits compared to the older oysters that survived from, I think, the 3-month to 6-month monitoring event. So it was a pulse that came through and settled and stayed.
Okay. What site is that?
Marina Isles, I believe, was the site.
And where's that?
That is on the southern end of the Banana River Lagoon, sublagoon.
Southern end of Banana River Lagoon?
Mhm.
Okay.
Just above
Interesting.
the O'Galley Bridge.
We definitely know that the Banana River is one of the more imperiled bodies of water in our jurisdiction, so.
Yeah, so whether this just happened to be a larger recruitment overall that managed to make it there, or what, I'm not we don't quite have enough information yet to
Okay.
determine where it's all coming from, but, and that information is in our monitoring report, so we
Okay.
can send an additional update.
All right, well, thank you.
Of course.
I believe the Marina Isle site is on the Barrier Island side of the Banana River. We have another site that's on
Yes.
near the southern tip, near Dragon Point,
Mhm.
on the Merritt Island side of the Banana River,
Mhm,
that's also performing extremely well. So that southern portion of Banana River seems to be,
Yeah, very
Has-
end. Uh-huh.
you
yeah.
know, good flow through there, and a big food supply, obviously.
Fishing is good in that area. You guys didn't hear it from me. All right. Okay, all right, well, thank you. And then I have one more question on Palm Bay's withdrawal of their shoreline project. Was there a reason for that?
We reached out to them to ask them to reconsider, and was there anything that we could do to change their mind about that withdrawal. They mentioned issues with the shoreline that they had proposed is actually owned by DOT, and then they wanted to go out deeper, which is state waters and requires a more difficult permit. The funding was less than what they were hoping for, so there were multiple issues.
All right, well, brings to mind last month's meeting where we're hoping to get approval on reserving some funds for projects that are more like this, I think. So I would encourage your staff to continue to try to promote the municipalities and other organizations to come up with ideas for projects more like this one. It was kind of disappointing to see that one
Right.
taken off.
And we've talked about that internally, and then with the zoo about reaching out to DOT to see if DOT would be interested in partnering, because we think that location is really a prime site for
Okay.
oyster restoration.
Okay, good.
Chair.
All right. Anything else? Oh, Courtney, go ahead.
I just have one. It's not really related to this, but I'm gonna have to leave a little early, so I just wanted to ask this before the end of the meeting. But last meeting, we had a comment about a stormwater project in Satellite Beach that was not the Jackson Avenue that you guys were doing, and we haven't heard about that yet. So when we were planning the Jackson Avenue, for example, we found the county was doing a project and we were doing a project in the same place, and if we had not coordinated, that could have been a conflict. But since we are coordinating, we're making it bigger and better, you know what I mean? So I think it would be a good idea for all the cities to, I don't know how you want us to do that. I can ask them to come to you and meet with you to go over all of the projects you all have in their jurisdiction, so we can see if we can combine our forces and make them better and coordinate and make sure that we don't have any conflicts. If
We had a
that's-
staff meeting a week or two ago about that coordination, so
Okay.
we should be actively reaching out to the
Okay.
cities anytime we are thinking about a project in their
Yeah, and we don't not want the county to do projects in the city. We just want to make sure that, because like the Jackson was a perfect example. We took that two ideas, smushed them together, and made them, twice as better. So, so I think that's the way we all want to go,
I think the better armed we are at the commission meeting to discuss why we're withholding or want to withhold some funds, the better, better equipped we are to answer that question, which will come up, the better off we'll be. So, thank you.
David, I got a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Chuck.
so on the other projects, the stormwater basin, year 3, for the land acquisition, Virginia, how is that funded for the stormwater basins, the further acquisition of land?
Typically, that is, if it's a county project, it's our county stormwater program that is funding that acquisition. If it's a city project, it's the city's funding that acquisition, because the cost share provided through the sales tax is calculated based on an assumption that you're going to work within an existing right-of-way and you're not going to need additional land acquisition.
And is that being done from a strategic for existing development or for planned development, anticipated?
The prioritization is, it's based on some, 5 years of detailed modeling that was done in support of the state's total maximum daily load work. And so we look at topography of the land, which way the water drains, how it collects into the drainage system, and then how that drainage system makes its way to the lagoon. Then we look at what is the land use within that basin, what are the soil types, what is the depth of groundwater, a lot of factors to try to figure out what is the loading of nitrogen and phosphorus coming from that basin through the stormwater system out to the lagoon. And so that's part of what's in this plan update, is that we updated that model with more recent land use, more recent rainfall, more recent evapotranspiration, and reprioritized which of those basins are thought to be delivering the highest loading to the lagoon. Did that?
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the monthly progress
I
report?
was wondering about the story map. Do we expect to have that by the rainy season? The story map on the reclaimed
On
water?
reclaimed water, yes, I think, we're pretty close to that. There's just, we've been extremely busy getting this plan update done. It's been all
Okay.
hands on deck. So,
And so that'll be, so the municipalities will be submitting the levels of nitrogen
yes.
in there. Okay, great.
Okay, all right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move forward to our monthly revenue graph presented by Crystal. Crystal here, oh, good morning.
So you should be seeing a new chart that now has 4 on there. And we've just received our first grouping, and we're at $129 million.
Wait, that has what on it? I'm sorry?
It should look like this. It has 4 graphs.
What did you add to it?
This new fiscal year.
Oh, this new year, okay.
I just have to say, our projections are like pretty right on. You guys are like amazing at that, I have to say, so
It is remarkable.
it is, it's amazing. You guys do a good job.
Do
Okay,
you have any questions further?
no,
That's all I have for you
that
today.
was brief.
I like these are good.
Yes, so
Thank you.
next
Yeah,
month
nice.
will be the detailed financial accounting, the quarterly detailed financial accounting and progress reports.
Yes. And I
And then we
think
still
we're,
have the table on back too, so.
yes, it still has the table, and you'll notice the table is now reaching through onto a second page because we're have that much data to throw.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
See you next month.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions or comments on the graph? Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to reports and special presentations. I think our first report this morning is going to be Dr. Jennifer Mitchell. She present?
Yes, she's here, and she has the clicker system for audience participation and feedback, so she's going to be passing out
Okay.
clicker things, and we just need everybody to pass them back in before they leave.
Sounds fun. This presentation is titled Water Less, 4 Strategies to Decrease Your Home's Water Use. Hope that doesn't mean less showering.
Quicker showers.
Yes,
So-
quicker showering.
So my daughter did we turned in the science projects today, and hers was on how how much water we can save by turning off the water while we're brushing our teeth. And
Oh.
she did the, with the water on, and then she documented the water off for the whole family. And then she projected out for the whole city of Satellite Beach and figured out that we could save 3 million gallons of water in a year if everybody turned the water off while they brushed their teeth. Yeah, it was cute.
But what you got to deal with the weirdness factor. When you don't hear water running, it's hard to brush your teeth. It just is. Try it
I'm so used to turning it off that I had a hard time doing the part where we had to keep it on. Like, it was such a, action that I take. But anyway. So.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning. So I really appreciate getting to be here and giving a little bit of information about one of our campaigns, Water Less. It's the first time we have run a campaign like this in quite some time. It is focused on outdoor irrigation. However, as you're pointing out, there are little tiny things that we can do inside where we can have a huge impact on our water supply. Again, I am Jennifer Mitchell with the St. Johns River Water Management District, and I know that everybody hopefully got one of those little clickers. They are fun because they are a way that you can engage and see other people's understandings or thoughts, and then they are also my sneaky way of getting data so that I can understand how the community understands our situations and knowledge of, and not really sneaky because you're all participating, understanding our water, where our water comes from, and the ways that we can conserve. So the really quick technology lesson is that you push the button that best represents your understanding of, or your response to the question. So we'll start with one of how familiar are you with the St. Johns River Water Management District? Do you work with us on a regular basis? And you have to pick the one that's best representative. Do you enjoy getting outside on district lands? Do you follow us on social media or get our water news? You've seen the name on your tax bill, or who? I have noticed going out and speaking to the public, that is my job, that a lot of folks may not know who the Water Management District is, or maybe they've seen it on their tax bill. So fortunately, I know that you all have a lot of presentations from the Water Management District and do work with us on a frequent basis. So I'm glad that that is the case.
That chart, Jennifer's real time?
That is real time. Okay. That is what everyone in this room just said.
All right. Well, it looks like we're well informed.
Yes, you are a very well informed audience. So, so our water resources in Florida, a lot of times people do, and you may also hear this, why does it matter if we save water in Florida? We have plenty of it. We get over 54 inches of rain. We're surrounded by ocean. We have over 7,000 lakes, over 11 million acres of wetlands. Clearly, water is not something that we need to worry about. But where is that water that's making its way into our homes? Where does it come from? I know Brevard County is going to be a little bit different than anywhere else in our district, but one of the biggest things with this question is knowing where your water comes from. It is not just coming from a utility. It comes from somewhere else before then. So where is your water coming from?
Good question.
So in most of our district, about 90% of the water from our district comes from the aquifer. However, we all know that down here, Lake Washington serves as public supply water for a certain area of Brevard County. But we can't forget that our aquifer system is connected to all of our water. I think this is one of our biggest things that we do forget. We think, well, we have water everywhere, so it doesn't matter how much we're using because we just have so much of it. But our water is coming from our aquifer system so frequently. But if we utilize too much, we have over 5 million people in our district. So again, each individual change that people can do is cumulative, and it allows us to leave more water for our natural systems. So at the district, it's our mission to ensure that we have enough water for all of the people and our natural systems. So that's a really big, important piece of it. So in order for the district to know how much water we need to be thinking about trying to conserve, we have to know how much water we're utilizing. And so we have annual reports on how much water is used in our district. So this is just fresh water, how much water is used. And we see that public supply and private wells, so that's the water that's coming from our municipal utilities, as well as our people that have wells in their backyard, that it makes up over 60% of the total fresh water that's used in our district. So it reminds us that each and every one of us has a really important role to play in water conservation. It's small things like turning off the water while you're brushing your teeth, or as we're going to see in just a second, thinking about our outdoor irrigation. Those are ways that we can shrink this whole pie and have more available water into the future. I will point out that landscape, recreation, and aesthetic, those are dedicated wells to golf courses, community fields, those sort of things. And we do have a good story of, although that line, that black line is population growth, that the amount of water that we're using overall, so the per capita water use, has decreased over time. So that's awesome to see. But let's get back to thinking about each of us and our individual impact. So how much water are you using in a day? Not your whole house. Think about just yourself. So on your little clickers, are you using between 30 and 50 gallons, 60 to 80, 80 to 100, more than 100, or no idea? So a lot of this is really just getting that awareness of remembering that our water, the water that we're using in our homes, in our yards, does have an impact on our ecosystems. Also, it's going to have an impact on where that water goes when we're done with that water. So I have noticed this trend that a lot of people think that they may use a lot less water than they actually are. So in our district, the average is about 84 gallons per person per day. And so, of course, there's some people using less and some people using more. And again, in Florida, it's not going to be a question of are we going to run out of water. It's going to be that cost of water. So our current supply or using water from the Floridan aquifer, the reason we utilize it is because it's really cheap. So it's about $1.50 per 1,000 gallons of water. Reclaimed or that treated wastewater is about $1.50 per 1,000 gallons. As we start having to go to alternative sources, as more and more people are coming and we need to be able to allow more water to stay in the aquifer and our ecosystems, it gets more expensive. Desalination, people are like, well, they've been using that in other countries for years. They have, but it's a lot more expensive. And so that's 6 to 8.5 times what our utility bills are now. So it's not what we might be currently paying. So conservation is the best way to have more water available into the future. And so how is that 84 gallons of water per day being used? So half of it is going to irrigation outside. So how do we, and as a district, we realize this is a place that we really need to educate folks that are moving to our area, or maybe that have been here for a while and haven't really thought about it because they've just been doing it forever. But how do we save water outside? So ways that we can do it, there are a few simple things. Who knows what that thing at the bottom corner is, the little contraption? A rain gauge, but more importantly, it is a functioning rain gauge. So the functioning part is really crucial, because if it does not actually work, then it will not turn off your irrigation system while you are, while it is raining or after it has rained. So one of our campaigns, or the campaign that we are running, is called Water Less. And so it has 4 seasonal components to it, that we have PSAs, we have utilities, bill stuffers that are on our website that utilities can utilize, or that if you have social media, you can share on social media. And so the upcoming spring campaign is, did you set it and forget it? So did you set your irrigation system and then totally walk away and not think about it? Making sure that that is functioning is one of those aspects of did you set it and forget it. You can see in that top house that they also have a decreased area of grass. They have more that you could irrigate with micro irrigation. You're not having to have that traditional irrigation. And then also, as homes are being designed, it's important that we consider the design of the irrigation system as well. So having those beds on a zone and the yard on a different zone so that you can turn it off. So do you have an irrigation system? Are you one of those folks that might be using half of your water outside? No? Yes, but I have it turned off. We're starting to see that that is more and more the overwhelming example of what people do. Yes, but it waters 1 day a week, or yes, it waters 2 days a week. I will say I used to have one that said 3 or more, and then I just felt guilty that I was like tricking people into selecting the wrong thing. So a lot of folks having irrigation systems, and but it looks like a large majority have it either turned off, maybe manually controlling it as necessary. But ultimately, where is that water from the irrigation coming from? Again, it's important to understand our connection and how we're utilizing water and how it has an impact. I will say that it's really important, those folks that are on those reclaimed water, understand that that water has nutrients in it. Understand how much nutrients it might have in it, and that you can decrease the amount of fertilization, because we don't want to be adding excess nutrients through trying to maintain our yards and ultimately just adding a lot of nutrients to our local water bodies. So some of the things we can do, again, outdoors, is one of our campaigns. So right now we're in the Skip a Week. So every other week we've been saying, as it's cold out, unfortunately the weather did not cooperate. It's kind of like when you design a stormwater project, it is inevitably going to be a very dry period. But if you can, skip a week. Your grass doesn't need as much water in the winter. Ensure that that rainfall sensor is working. Again, with that set it, did you set it and forget it campaign, can you check for your busted and misdirected heads? So a lot of us run our irrigation in the middle of the night. It might come on, turn off. We never know whether or not it ran, if it had some areas that got too much water, or if we're trying to increase our driveway space by irrigating that. So make sure that you don't have one of those geysers shooting up in your front yard, and make sure that you are maintaining your system. Or can you just reduce the area that's needing irrigation in the first place? So I'm going to go back, sorry. So a lot of folks are able to do that watering every other week. And if you're interested in testing to make sure your rainfall sensor is working, you can spray it with a hose for a little bit at a time. So you're going to saturate it and then go turn your system on. If your system turns on, it is not functioning. Also, if it is like dangling or installed under an eave, even if the wiring is correct, it will not function.
Mine's indoors.
Yes, indoors it will not work either. So winter is one of the best times to do some landscaping. So make sure that when you are always choosing plants that are appropriate for where you're trying to plant them. Otherwise, you may use excess nutrients and excess water to try and make them live in those settings. This is the graphic for our Water Less campaign. If anybody is interested in getting more information about it, we do have that waterlessflorida.com website. Please go visit it. If you are interested in getting any of our PSAs or our media from it, please check out the website, or you can email me as well, and I will be happy to share that. And it is a reminder that we are under irrigation restrictions year-round. Right now, it is no more than 1 day a week. Everyone that irrigates and has an in-ground irrigation system, with the exception of reclaimed, falls under these irrigation restrictions. So we should not be watering more than 1 day per week. And then again, our Water Less campaign. So each season has a little bit different theme. Coming up, thinking about the summer, we know that our yards only need 3/4 of an inch of water a week, even in the summer. So if we get those nice 3 o'clock rains, knowing how much rain has occurred and being able to either just turn your system off, or if you're one of those that already has it turned off, leave it off, and irrigate after your yard needs the water. So really paying more attention to what your yard needs versus maybe artificial, it's just set and I'm not thinking about it. I do want to pull in this one last little piece again. How we use our water. Since all of our water is connected and lawn care is so frequently one of the places that we are really intensive with our nutrients and water, anytime we are overwatering or putting too much water on our yards, we are allowing some of those additional nutrients that we put through either fertilizers, reclaimed water, or the two combined, going into our stormwater systems, which might either directly go into our water bodies or into our stormwater systems, and then a little bit later out into our water bodies. And so I'm going to skip ahead and say thank you very much. And let me get the clickers back, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions?
David.
Go ahead, Jay.
Jennifer, one of your earlier charts was water use by numbers. And I think I saw in there that bottled water, this is just within the St. John's district, right?
Correct.
Was 0.1%.
Correct.
Do you know how that relates or compares to the other districts around Florida?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. I know that it had, and I will point out, so we have started including the bottled water, or I have, as I've been speaking to communities, because I always get that question. People say, why is the district giving away our water, but you're asking me to stop watering my yard? And I really want to highlight that it's a very small amount of water that we're using in our district for bottled water. The beverage industry as a whole uses more, but that's soda and beer, and people tend to have less of a problem with those value-added products.
For flavor.
I have a question. Why isn't the reclaim on restrictions? I mean, I see cities, I see down the streets, cities, municipalities, watering during the day. It's mostly going out on the streets and running down into the storm system. And I do know that reclaimed water has a lot of nutrients.
So they are not on our restrictions. So depending on the utility or the municipality, they may have their own restrictions. One of the reasons that the amount of water going out through the systems basically is not regulated on a whole is that in a lot of the early days of reclaimed, it was we need to get rid of this water, and so there was no need to say you can only water 2 days a week. But I do believe in most stormwater ordinances, only stormwater should be going down those storm drains, and so in theory, you could go after those folks that have the runoff that are overwatering and that are vagrant.
Well, because it's like, I mean, my thing is, I'm sorry, is the mic on? My thing is, I go down US 1, all the new roadways, they do a ton of landscaping, ton of irrigation, they use reclaimed water, and then there's a maintenance issue. They don't maintain it, and it's basically, to me, it's always been a big waste of money for the landscaping that occurs in the islands area because of the lack of maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I see a lot of overspraying with the systems, irrigation systems, and they do run down the road. I mean, I would say probably half of it's going down the road down the storm system.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even if it is just that it is running for too long, that the soil can only hold so much water, so you do get that runoff into the storm systems, and those can cause, even if they're storm systems that are not directly going into our water bodies, they can cause major shifts.
Now, is there
in
a way
communities and
that
those sort of things.
St. John's can actually enforce it?
That the use of reclaimed is Department of Environmental Protection.
Melissa?
Can I just add something to that comment? So, and from a utility perspective, there's a balance to be had because there's still, many utilities still do face disposal challenges as well, but there are many utilities that have very strong restrictive programs in place with reclaimed restrictions that are similar to potable water. So I think you'll find a lot of variability across the industry in that. And so it's, but there's both sides of those pictures represent a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Melissa, go ahead.
So I've learned, hi.
Hi.
So I've learned that a lot of these issues stem from very early decision making, like when municipalities or the county approve developments and what considerations are in place in that contract, that agreement. What are some provisions that, for these issues, that you would ask those municipalities and county to consider for overall effects of water conservation? Like for instance, grass types and things like that.
So one thing that the Alachua County is actually doing right now is they are going back in all of their land use development documents and looking at everything. So is there any regulation that they have that might inadvertently be causing an increased water use, that if they were to change that, that those would be able to decrease overall water use. I would also say that that there needs to be a greater amount of engagement with as folks are moving into those new developments, sorry, to understand what they're moving into and that they don't need to be watering as much if those irrigation systems are installed. We also have a way that homes are able to be certified called Florida Water Star. It's a state accreditation that's actually run through the Builders Association now, but it's a water management district created program. And it focuses on outdoor irrigation, making sure that that outdoor irrigation is designed appropriately so that irrigation heads are not overwatering a system, but also that they are being thoughtfully designed before they go in. Alachua County also has recently taken up reviewing all of their in the unincorporated areas, reviewing all of the irrigation drawings to make sure that there is a plan for irrigation going in. So there are a lot of different ways that thinking about how water is going to be used at the end can be just eliminated in the first place.
Could you repeat the name of the state accreditation?
It's called Florida Water Star.
Okay.
So it is a, it actually, the home is built to higher water standards, both indoor and out. So it's somewhat similar to the like LEED accreditation, but it is just for irrigation.
Courtney, go ahead.
So I was just going to comment on that. Like in our city, we required new plats to, especially if they have wet retention, to use their stormwater ponds as the source of water for their irrigation. But and for commercial properties, most that are going in now have no irrigation at all. So they're all zero-scape. Like Doubles is all zero-scape. There is no irrigation. So a lot of cities and the county are starting to promote that. And honestly, you know, developers would love nothing more than not to have to pay for an irrigation system. So, you know, when I've found like very little fight over that on a commercial level. So usually you have a fight on the residential level, but not the commercial level.
So another thing that some communities in Central Florida are doing are putting in the irrigation system in the front and then putting in an unirrigated bahia as a backyard as a potential conservation method as well.
So, and I'm happy to share our utilities efficiency program, which does establish requirements for new developments, and based upon, we have limitations on percentage of sprays and things of that nature, which drives that exact behavior. So almost every new development we see is unirrigated in the rear. The other consistency thing is that we find is that there is a lot of support across the development community. As long as there are consistent and uniform regulations, because what happens is if there's not, it ends up being a marketability problem for their business. Because if they're just choosing to do it, unless that's the market they're targeting, the reality is someone comes up and they see this, you know, lush green lawn, and that's what they're going for. But if we're seeing that shift, and you look out west and you've seen this shift as well, and it's just different. It's not any less aesthetically pleasing, it's just different. And so as you start to promote that consistency, I think that's where the support will come, because you're not starting to see, you know, one company having an advantage over another in marketability. And that's one of their biggest challenges they face. And we've seen that we hold quarterly meetings with all of our developers, and we don't see a lot of pushback as long as there's consistency, so that we're not impacting their business.
The other thing I will say that communities need to be careful about if they are going to go towards no irrigation is that there isn't an opportunity for private wells to go in for irrigation afterwards if the whole point is putting them in for water conservation.
So that's a good point. So when we do a project that has things like that with no irrigation and stuff like that, there's a long-term developers agreement that's attached to that, and it's part of their plat. And so if they want to change that, they would have to come in and get approval for that. And that can always happen. So.
Yeah, one last comment on that. I guess the only other piece, though, related to that is making sure that individual communities retain the flexibility to make the choices that are right for their area,
Right.
because there are some places where private wells do make a lot of sense. You get over into Central Florida where our water supply is, it is the Floridan, but there's significant confining units between the surface water and the Floridan aquifer, and there's many places through there that either reclaimed or shallow groundwater can make a lot of sense in terms of preserving Floridan aquifer consumption. You get into other areas where the surface water aquifer and the Floridan are connected, and that same answer is probably not applicable. And so I get that's one piece for everyone here, is that as we think about rules and we start to think about prompting statewide rules, that's one of the pieces. Is this isn't a simple answer, and one size fits all approaches do not work. We have to have guidance that puts us toward an objective, but leave adequate flexibility to be able to make choices for the environmental conditions that exist in each area.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Jeff, I have one final question for you before we move on. In your Water Less campaign, one of your 4 bullet points was reducing the area needed for irrigation. Is there something you guys do to reduce that friction to get a homeowner to go from a full yard of Floritan or St. Augustine to something that's more irrigation friendly?
So there are lots of educational modules. So like the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program through the IFAS offices in each county. That is a tremendous resource that hopefully everyone takes advantage of. One of the things that we have seen actually be successful up in Alachua County, I hate to keep harping back to them, but they're doing a lot for water conservation. They applied and were able to successfully get cost share funding for a turf buyback program. So homeowners are able to work through the county, have heads capped on irrigation and putting in that Florida friendly landscaping. So they're able to get half of the cost of that retrofit paid for through those funding opportunities. So
Say from a kind of a sales or marketing background, you promote something to a general audience about, hey, convert your lawn over to irrigation friendly landscaping, but if you don't give them a mechanism to get started, a hyperlink, a click, somewhere to go, the friction might be too much for many people to just never make that first step.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So the Florida Friendly website is one of the best places to go for some of that initial information of what plants should we be planting here that aren't going to need additional watering as well.
What website is that?
It's the Florida Friendly website. I do not know. It's an IFAS website.
Okay.
And then our Water Less will also, that waterlessflorida.com will have links to other places that you can go for information about.
Waterlessflorida.com? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Okay. Moving forward. We have Holly's going to present the, I think it's the results of the communication survey.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today.
Good morning.
I'm Holly Abeels with University of Florida IFAS Extension here in Brevard County. And a couple months ago, I presented to the COC about a survey to go out looking at communication and how people learn about the SORL program. And so these are the results of that survey I'm presenting with you today. Just a quick overview. There were 16 questions in the survey. I had 124 responses. I would have liked if that been 2, 3, or 5 times more, but this is what we got. But we did get 35 zip codes, so we did have a large swath of different areas of people who answered. And then this was just the breakdown of the age groups that we got. So a wide range of both younger and older groups answering the questionnaire. So the first question that we asked was if you had heard about the sales tax, house and sales tax approved by voters, and the majority of the people did hear about it. There were some that did not hear about the sales tax. And we asked if people were interested in information about the projects that are in the project plan and the progress being made. The majority of these were very interested. There was no one that said that they weren't interested, so people were either very or somewhat interested in the progress and the projects. We asked next if people have been actually following the progress of the plan, and a majority of people said yes, but there were some people who haven't been following but plan to follow in the future, and then some people who haven't been following at all, so they weren't aware of or haven't been thinking about looking at what the progress of the plan is so far. Next, asking how familiar people were with the projects in the plan. So we had a small amount that were very familiar, and then the majority of people were either familiar or somewhat familiar with the projects. So for this question, we wanted to get an idea of where people would actually, or where they have gone to find information about the project plan. And we had a variety of different answers for this. So people could choose any or all of these. So this was an option where they could choose multiple answers if they wanted. The majority of these were from social media sites, which this makes sense because this survey was sent out on social media for people to fill out. So that was the main way that probably people found out about this survey. But people also looked at website or learned about it through the Citizen Oversight Committee. And then we had some people who haven't yet looked for information. So if people did pick either the Citizen Oversight Committee, a website, or a social media site, they actually got an additional question asking how they actually interacted with these three. So we asked specifically about website or social media or the COC. And then if people further on the right, if they received an email or a newsletter from an organization, we asked them to please tell us which one. And then if there was an other, so if there was some other way that they were learning about this that wasn't included in these answers, they could tell us what that was. So I'm going to go over those kind of 5 breakdowns so we can delve a little bit deeper into those questions. So how did people find out information via the Citizen Oversight Committee? So we had people who either attended the meeting or watched the meeting either live or later on. Some people did talk to committee members or they talked to friends who attended the meeting. And then for the others, the little white box right above that was what the other answers were. So they looked on various websites or they saw Facebook updates or they read comments on social media. You'll see quite a bit of reference to the Brevardine River Lagoon Coalition because they did share this survey on their Facebook page. So we did get quite a few people, I'm sure, who filled it out because they saw that on their Facebook page. So you'll see them referenced quite a bit in the survey. So if people said that they went to a website to find information, we wanted to highlight the SORL websites or the different areas that SORL has for being able to look at the plan. So the majority of people did go to the SORL website for this information. And then some people have gone to the dashboard or to the story map. We also included Lagoon Loyal since that's kind of a new component of getting educational information out about SORL. And then we asked others. So those answers were the Brevard River Lagoon Coalition, helpthelagoon.org, and then this related Facebook site, IRLDG, which I'm not sure actually what the acronym is for that, or what that stands for, but someone did mention that. And again, which social media sites? So we wanted to highlight the social media sites to see if people are referencing and going to those. And the majority of people are looking at the Facebook page, a smaller amount of people going to Instagram and YouTube. And then for the other social media sites, you can see the list here, all the way from Marine Resources Council to the IRLC, Titusville Living Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor. So these are all the other various places that people are going on social media to find out about the project plan. Most likely these groups are sharing information that they see on the Sorrel Facebook page, or information that they're getting from attending meetings and other ways that they can get information. So if we ask people if they receive an email or a newsletter from an organization that tracks the plan, and these are the groups they get that information from, with Marine Resources Council being the most choices. So 8 people said that they got information from there. And so these are the various different groups that are sending out information either via newsletter or some type of email providing information about the plan. I just want to highlight that these are probably places where I know you guys already have partnerships and that you're already working with these groups. And so these are great resources for getting the information out to more people. So I think this is important to just note that these groups are definitely doing it. And if you want further interaction, that there might be other groups you could reach out to get the information out. And then we asked so how other places that you go. Some of these are redundant to other questions we asked. So people did say Facebook, so that would be considered social media. We do have a couple other places where they've seen it, obviously newspaper, other social media sites, other types of staff like the Brevard Zoo conservation staff. And so these are other places where people are getting information. A couple people did highlight the Lagoon Straight Talks. So I know you guys have one coming up next week. And so that's another great place for people to get information about the plan and the projects. So we know people are interacting and getting information about the plan. We just wanted to get an idea of if anyone actually provides public comments about the Sorrel plan. So the majority of people do not. But we do have a small number of people who do. So we wanted to get an idea of how exactly they're doing that. And so the majority of people are either attending this meeting, or contacting county staff. Some people are going to Brevard BOCC meetings. And some people are using the comment online at the IRL project email address. And then for the other people, so that they used social media. So they actually provided comments on social media. And so they thought that was a way of being able to provide public comment. So we have an idea of how people currently are trying to get information or looking for information about the Sorrel plan. So then we wanted to ask what other avenues or what preferred avenues are for people where they want to receive information. So again, Facebook is a big one. Again, this survey was was released on Facebook, and people were asked on Facebook to fill it out. So that was one of the major ways that people learned about the survey. So that makes sense. But then again, people also would like some type of email, either a newsletter or be on a listserv to get information as well. So I thought that maybe those people who are getting that information from other organizations would also like to maybe get something specifically from the COC or the Sorrel group. And then a lot of people go to the Sorrel website as well. There's a couple that are starred, so like a website other than the Sorrel website, radio, newspapers, newsletter, magazines, television. We asked them to be specific about where those areas would be that they would like to see. And so we have on the left a website other than Sorrel, on the right radio. So these are the avenues that people would like to hear or to go to get information about Sorrel. I found it interesting about the any fishing websites, because there was a comment about how the community isn't aware, the fishing community might not be as aware about projects. And so I thought that that might be just a different type of avenue or a different way to go about getting information out. Newspaper is on the left and newsletter on the right. So a variety of different other avenues that can be used for getting information out that people would go to. And then magazines and television. I actually did notice the other day that Virginia and Dwayne and Jay Waters with BRLLC did go to a local news station to talk about the plan. So I think that is another good way of just having a different type of audience, and someone that might see it that might not know anything that's going on. So, and then for social media, I was surprised that people did say Instagram, just because I think there's a small amount of people that know that Sorrel has an Instagram page. So, and that is definitely an avenue that gears more towards our younger audiences. So I think that would be a good way of getting that the younger group that maybe we're not reaching right now, or you guys aren't reaching right now, for getting information out. And then for the other, there was a couple comments about public forums and quicker replay of meetings, which I'm not sure if that's actually something that's doable, because I know it takes time to get this recorded and put up on the website. But there was a comment about potentially moving meetings out of Viera into other communities. So that way maybe people could possibly attend instead of having to drive to Viera. I know Viera is fairly central, but we all know that there's sort of a stopping point and where people stop going up or down the county. So potentially moving the meetings might help to get other types of participants. And then, of course, the very last question is just the general providing any comments. And this one was specific about how the team can best communicate about progress of the plan and how individuals can help. So I pulled out just some of the ones that were specific to this question. There were other comments that weren't necessarily related to that question. And there's a couple pages of this, so you can see the various comments that people left. I think the partnership one is a really great one, just because that's a great way to get information out. Workshops and public meetings, I think, is also another way to just interact one-on-one with the public. Social media and Facebook was a big one, so that was one place that people definitely wanted more, to find information about the project plan. And I liked this yearly mailed update to all citizens. I know I'm definitely one of those people that throws junk mail away pretty readily, but potentially this could be included in some other type of important information, maybe like your tax bill or something like that, where you can get information about the plan. And then this is the last page of notes of comments. I did also I'm a little more biased, I guess, towards the recreational angler. So I did like how someone did mention reaching the recreational angler and maybe doing seminars at restaurants or information at fishing areas and boat ramps. I thought that was a good comment, a good suggestion brought up. And Virginia has this entire report, so I'm not sure if she's shared it already, but if you do want to see it in print and be able to review it yourself, I can either send it to you directly or Virginia has it as well. So.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Will there be another survey done ever, or?
Yeah, Virginia and I usually meet once a year to talk about what this year's survey will be. So we will do that again this year, and potentially we could repeat this or do something different. So I'm happy to help in that regard. If we want.
Findings are very interesting. Pool size is paltry.
Yes.
I promoted it on Facebook a lot. I thought I alone, might generate that many surveys. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to my posts and let my friends and family know that, hey, I was counting on you and you all failed. So, are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I wanted to just add to the, you mentioned the fishing websites and social media. I think recreation in general, any sort of recreation, kayaking, canoeing, boating, whatever that those are, would be great opportunities for us as well, and probably really expands the audience.
Yeah, agreed, because
Yeah.
you would be getting both the person working that position and their clientele as well, so.
And then in terms of getting the survey out, I'm sorry if I missed it, but did we do any Facebook advertising to get it out?
I don't think specifically there was advertising. I think it was just via my office's Facebook page. I know the Sorrel, and then I know the River River Lagoon Coalition shared it. I'm sure there were others that did, but those are the ones that I'm aware of. So.
Okay, because it might be worth it to spend some dollars there.
Oh, definitely.
Just to, avoid such a kind of self-selecting audience.
Yeah, and you can do the boosting of posts
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and that doesn't cost too much. But yeah, advertising is definitely a way we could go in the future.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I
Vinny?
didn't know, so we've got these questions, we've got the answers, so this one is done for the year? Is that what we're saying with the survey?
Correct. Yep. So
Okay.
this was for like the end of 2019.
Okay.
The survey went out.
Because I didn't know if we, I always like the idea of trying to get different media when we do surveys, because Facebook and online is one group, but then there's a whole group that really doesn't do that. And with commission meetings, maybe if we had some that were printed out on a piece of paper just here for people to come and get. And the other thing is I think that information is good. I don't know, I'm one that likes to dive into people's minds and see what they're thinking. Maybe if we had a question like that was a little bit more self-inflective, kind of how well do you think the money's being spent? Because then you can relate that to how they're getting their information and really get answers as to, well, should we focus our reporting into another outlet, or try to see trends or connections if you can see how people are feeling, not only what they're doing. Because sometimes that intersection of how they're feeling and how they're doing really tells you where you need to focus your action.
Yeah, good point.
Melissa?
I saw that you were tracking zip codes, and I was wondering if you were also, is there a geographic overlay where we can see where the respondents were located?
I don't have a map specific to that, but I do have the list of zip codes, so I can get that for you. We
Okay,
did
so
have
just zip codes.
Yeah, so we do have. There were some zip codes that were out of state, so I think we did get some snowbirds in there. So, and one person specifically mentioned they lived in Canada and came down here, so we did get that different group. But yeah, I can give you the list of just the zip codes. I don't have it on like a geographic map or anything like that. But
Okay, so were you able to understand if most of the respondents came from South or Mid-County or any North County issues? So.
yeah, I can get that information to you.
Oh,
I had a quick comment, not a question for Holly. One of the responses was that the meeting videos were not getting out quickly enough, and I'm pretty sure that I've looked the same day on Space Coast Government TV, and the replay of the meeting is usually available the same day or a day or two later.
So with the ADA compliance, they kind of shifted the whole TV system. We've got new screens, it's a whole new system. And today's meeting is the first time that we are live streaming with closed captioning. So I believe that this new process, now that we have it set up and it's working, it should be almost immediate. But for several months, there was a very long delay, and Brandon's working with the SCG TV folks on the backlog.
Great. So everything we say comes across the TV monitor live?
Yes.
Hi, Sheree.
With teletype across the bottom. There are two people taking turns frantically typing everything that you were saying. Wow.
So speak slowly in the future, I think.
For the 4 people in our viewing audience.
Okay, anything else for Holly? Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Holly. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, that wraps up our reports and special presentations. I don't think we have any old business to discuss. We do. Our new business today is going to be the draft plan by Marcy, but I don't want to go there yet. I think our timing is such that we'll take a break here in just a minute, and then when we come back, we'll do the plan. I do have other new business today to discuss, though. It looks like Our committee has been recognized as a candidate, at least for an MRC recognition, and wanted to bring that to everybody's attention for our rigorous work to assure that tax dollars are being collected through the voter-approved half-cent sales tax effectively. I've received word that any number of us or all of us are encouraged to attend. There won't be any conflicts if and when this were to proceed to actual recognition. But we have Terry Casto, who's not here today. I think could be a primary candidate for us to represent us to the MRC. But I do want to get an alternate because Terry hasn't officially even been told this yet. So, is there anybody here? We don't really have to decide it here right now, but if anybody's thinking about attending or wants to attend or is happy to represent us, just let me know. Oh,
I was already going.
Okay.
And I'm going to be attending too.
Okay. All right. So we have plenty. I imagine if and when the time comes, we can figure it out then. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll work on the plan.
All right, and while people are breaking, there's one missing clicker, so if the person with the missing clicker could please
right here.
return that to, there we go, wonderful, okay.
Are you going to use?
We have Marcy from Tetra Tech here to present the draft plan for 2020. Good morning, Marcy, and thanks for coming.
It's good to see you all in person. I am one of those people who watch you on YouTube every month, so I am able to keep tabs and prepare for this moment for the updates. As Virginia mentioned, we have been very busy over the last couple months getting this update together, and this is the fourth set of updates as part of the 2020 plan revision. So the table of contents should look very familiar. The acknowledgements, we only made minor edits to reflect the latest COC members, and then to reflect your speakers over the last year of meetings. There were no changes to that list of acronyms, and then the information in the executive summary was just updated for the 2020 information, and then I'll go through each of these sections separately. So section 1 is background. We only made one minor edit. There was text in there about the return on investment if you implemented the plan in 20 years versus 5 years, and it turns out the economic valuation was done on 10 years and 5 years, so we just corrected the dates on that. In section 2 for the approach, we had some information about the central SEB project zone, which is the very southern part of Brevard County. We haven't really been focusing projects in that area because there's a lot of other regional efforts happening. So what we did is that table just had the annual load information. We did add some columns for those critical 5-month loads for January through May to kind of mirror some of the other tables in the report. And then in section 3 with the pollutant sources, we have some updated muck flux data based on some FIT studies. So we did update that contribution from muck loading, and you can see one example of the table here for Banana River. So we have both nitrogen and phosphorus loading for all three sublagoons. So section 4.1, we're starting to get into chapter 4 is all of our projects. So 4.1 is our reduced projects. In that first section with the public education and outreach, we added information on the new Lagoon Loyal program that you all have been talking about at several of your meetings. In the second section with the wastewater upgrades, we got some new information on some of the facility concentrations and made some changes, and I'll show you that table in just a minute. We also added some new facilities for the spray field and rapid infiltration basin, or RIB, upgrades, and I'll show you that table in a minute as well. We didn't make any changes to the package plant section and no changes to the sewer laterals, although you all did approve 3 new projects last month, so that's reflected in a later chapter of the plan. So if you do have that plan in front of you, table 4.9 is the wastewater upgrades. Last year we had included the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station as one of the facilities that should be upgraded. They provided some more recent data on their nutrient concentrations, and as you can see from that table, based on those data, the nutrient loads are actually lower, and so it wasn't as cost effective to upgrade that facility, so that came off the list. But if you do look at the next section with the spray fields and RIBs, we had a project to upgrade their RIB by adding that bioabsorption activated media. That one is still cost effective, so that part of the project is still in there. Also in the spray field and RIB section in table 4.11, we did add 3 more facilities that are highlighted in yellow here. If you look at the cost per pound for the nitrogen, which is that last column, you can see they're all under $800 a pound, and so we decided we'd go ahead and add those in. We did schedule them further out in implementation to make sure we have time to work with those facilities and gather more data before moving forward. Still in the reduce, we have some updates to the septic system removal and upgrade projects. The list of recommended projects for septic to sewer largely looked the same. There were some changes based on feedback from Brevard County Utilities. We also did some updates to the septic to sewer upgrade projects, or I'm sorry, connection, the Quick Connect projects, which you can see in table 4.3 here, and then also the number of projects that we were going to upgrade overall. In section 4.1.5, we have our stormwater treatment projects. In the introductory part of this, there's a table explaining all the different types of stormwater treatment and those efficiencies. So we updated the efficiencies for managed aquatic plant systems, also known as floating islands, to match the latest DEP guidance. We also put a note in there that while a lot of the bioabsorption activated media text focuses on bold and gold, that's just because that's where we have data, but there are other types of BAM that may be used if there's some Florida-specific data that can be shown. We also updated the list of basins that are going to be upgraded, and that's shown here in table 428, and all the details of those basins are in Appendix E. There was some work done by Claudia Listapad to use some more recent data and some more improved infrastructure mapping to refine those basins and the load coming from them to reprioritize where we should implement projects. In section 4.2, we have our remove projects. So for muck removal, as I mentioned earlier, there was some more studies by Florida Tech that provided some more updated flux data, and so that did result in some changes to our recommended project list. So in table 430 for the Banana River Lagoon, we added a project near Patrick Air Force Base, which is the 3rd one on the list. As you can see, it's fairly cost effective, and it's wound up based on the new flux data coming in above Cocoa Beach Golf, which we had added to the plan last year. Cocoa Beach Golf has those 2 symbols after it because it is, as you can see, it's a large dollar project, and so it's only partially funded at this time. So the county is looking for other funding sources for that one. And table 431 has the projects for the North IRL. The last project on the list for O'Galley, last year it was Northwest. It has been replaced with Northeast. We realized there was some confusion with the flux data, and really it was the Northeast project that was the more cost effective. Also in section 4.2, we have the surface water remediation system option. There were no changes to that. That's still not one of the more cost-effective options. In 4.2.3 with the enhanced circulation, we added some updates on a couple studies that are going on. So Florida Tech has received funding from the legislature to do some modeling and data collection for a pilot project for enhanced circulation. And they've also continued their modeling work that you all heard about last year on looking at how modifications to the State Road 528 and 520 causeways and bridges could help improve circulation. We also added a new section for vegetation harvesting. This is one of the project options that DEP gives credit for. It's removing exotic invasive species that are floating on the canals or in the lagoon itself. So we provided some background information based on what DEP gives credit for, and then the county also had done some studies, some lab analysis of plant material and the cost of harvesting. So there's a cost share of $110 per pound of nitrogen that was removed. You all did vote on some of those projects last month, and there are, as they get implemented, we'll have some more data to help refine that total cost share. In section 4.3 with Restore, for the oysters, planted shorelines, and seagrass planting, we just added a little bit more detail and some more references to explain the reasoning behind giving credit for those types of projects. We also added a new section here for clam restoration and aquaculture. So this provides some background information on the nitrogen sequestration from the clams and what the costs are to harvest them. And so at this point, there's an estimated cost share of about $200 per pound of nitrogen. No projects were currently recommended for funding in the plan this year, but by adding this section, that gives an option for future years. In section 4.4 with Respond, the first section, there were no changes. That just provides some background information about these annual updates and that process. In the second section, we did add some updated information on the completed projects, including a new table that was not in the plan last year that summarizes the tax funds spent to date only on completed projects. So if you look, it's a shorter list than what you've been talking about at your meetings because we're focusing on the ones that are fully completed. We also updated the maps of those completed projects and provided some updated performance data for the sewer lateral smoke testing and the Breeze Swept septic to sewer project. And then the last section for research needs, we had no changes this year. So sections 5, 6, and 7 are the first few annual updates for 2017, 18, and 19. We, across the board, made some changes to the color coding of the pie charts and the little flow chart in the executive summary and those rainbow tables. So you'll see that there's a little bit of different color scheme in each of these. In the 2018 update, there was information about the revenue projections. As part of the 2020 update, we gave the latest projections, so we wanted to make sure people, if they read this section 6, that they knew they should look up into section 8 for the latest information. And then last year, as part of the 2019 update, we put a list of unfunded projects. So up in chapter 4, where we talk about each of the project types, you have the table. Those highlighted in green are recommended. Everything else we didn't have funding for because they weren't as cost effective. So those were in the 2019 update. We deleted them from there and moved them up to 2020. So you had the latest list in the most updated section. So that brings me to the 2020 update. We started out, as we do every year, with the table of the latest cost share eligibility by project type. So this was approved a few months ago and went out with the forms before people submitted projects. And then the first section is the new projects. So this is the list of projects you all approved at your meeting last month. Section 8.2 has some project changes that I'll go through in more detail shortly. Section 8.3 has those updated revenue projections that I just mentioned. So that's talking now about the $494 million that we're anticipating over the 10 years of the tax. And then section 8.4 is where we move those unfunded projects. And they are sorted by the most cost effective by project type. So if there is money available and you're looking for other project options, you can go to that section. So in section 8.2, this was some of the other changes that occurred to projects beyond what you discussed at your meeting last month. So in table 8.3, we did receive some requests for project withdrawals, and these are based on either new data, or there was a reason that those wouldn't work in that location, or if some funding fell through. So one of the examples is that first one, that Cape Canaveral Air Force Station upgrade. We had some new data that showed it wasn't as cost effective, so we pulled it from the plan. So this list of projects came out of the plan this year. In Table 8.4, we also received requests from the City of Cocoa Beach to change their schedule on several of their projects. They have other grant funding coming in that was delayed, and the tax fund is only a small part of those projects, so they did have to slip those out a couple of years. So that is reflected in the rainbow tables in the plan update. And then Table 8.5, every year we do update the cost share based on the actual data we're getting on what it's costing to implement these projects. And so people have the opportunity, if they have a project already in the plan, to come and request additional funding using the latest cost share. So this is a list of the folks who came to us for that, and so it worked out to be just a little under $4 million in additional cost share. So this is the comparison of the plan costs. The table, the pie chart on the left is from the original plan, where we had about $302 million compared to the plan today at $429. These are the uninflated costs. We do have a rainbow table that shows our estimated inflated costs for the plan to date. In the original plan, that big slice of gray was the muck removal. As you know, we started shifting as of last year away from muck and more towards doing some of those wastewater upgrades. The wastewater is in that orange and peach kind of slices, so you can see how we shifted from the original plan to the current plan. There's a lot less gray and more of the orange and peach is where we're moving towards those wastewater upgrades. The last section, section 9, is the summary of the plan through this update. So we've updated all the tables in this section. There's a series of tables that compare the estimated load reductions to the draft TMDLs that were updated. There's a table that compares the remove and restore projects, so those are the oyster and the planted shoreline and the muck projects, to the muck flux to see how much of that we're addressing through these projects. There's a table 9.8, that has been in there, that shows the projects and the estimated reductions in costs. It was kind of rolled up to a higher scale. This year, you'll notice it's a lot bigger. Any project that has a name is now listed out, so you can track exactly what what projects are still in there and what their cost share is. And then from your tables every year, when you approve new projects, they have a number, so that's also in this table. So we're hoping that'll help track things a little bit better. We also updated those rainbow tables, both the uninflated and inflated costs. We also have a series of appendices. So Appendix A is potential funding sources, so we updated that with a few new options. Appendix B has the references, so any of the new references are highlighted. Appendix C has some additional public education information. We did not change that from last year's plan. Appendix D also did not change. That's all the old septic system information from the original plan. Appendix E was fully updated, so this has the detailed list of all of the new stormwater project basins that were approved. And then Appendix F for the seagrasses has some updated figures to incorporate some of the latest data on the seagrass transects, and then to add a new reference. So as soon as we finish one update, we start thinking about the next one. So the 2021 update will be the 5th update to the plan, and if you're noticing, it's getting very large and unwieldy and a little confusing. So we're going to just start over. So we are going to try to streamline everything. If the project has been deleted, we're going to take it out. We're going to get rid of all of those chapters that has those incremental, the 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 updates, and just try to bring it all back together of here's where we stand with stormwater, here's where we stand with muck, and just go down the line of each project type. We're also going to delete some of those appendices that has the old plan information, because I think that's just more confusing than anything. And then so we hope to bring you a much more streamlined, less confusing plan in the next update. And with that, I'll take any questions on the 2020 update.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Jay.
I don't have a question. I just want to compliment you on your very last comment, which was for the next plan, you're going to streamline it because, in fact, it has become very unwieldy. So I was glad to hear that.
And I think that a lot of the format was at the request of the COC. So this complicated document for somebody who's new to the process to jump in and follow was driven by the people up here.
Yes.
And so, Marcy's worked, she's worked,
Thank you,
and Virginia
John.
both have done a great job in trying to take our input. And,
Well, the goal was to maintain that history too. We didn't want to lose any information, but all the plans are online, and we figured with the 5th update, that was a good time to kind of start over clean again and make it a little bit easier to follow.
and great job.
Courtney, go ahead.
I think this is great, and I don't know how you guys do this in 2 weeks, but I think the only thing that I'd like to see stay is that funding percentage chart. You know how you had the first one, and then now, and it shows the shift from budgeting to, I think, that just tracking that as we move on, I think we should that should be readily available in the plan. That's the only thing I think I'd like to see history-wise. But I agree, I think we all wanted that history because, we wanted to make sure that we kept the projects that were withdrawn alive and stuff like that. And I think you're right, it's gotten too much and too big, and we need to streamline it. But it's great, and thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it.
Charlie, go ahead.
Also a great plan update. The highlighting made it very easy to follow if you just wanted to get kind of the quicker version of it. And I think what Courtney said, those charts, the pie charts, you get a lot of information in a little space. And I think people are usually more attracted to charts than narratives. So good to keep those up. One thing, and David alluded to this early in the meeting about, the rationale for why we held back some money from the funding, and it shows like in the section about the clams, that's all new from when we started this, and we need to make sure that if those are, viable and economically, efficient ways of cleaning up the lagoon, we have that reserve so we can continue to fund those type of efforts. So.
Marcy, two things. One thing, is that money that we did hold back, which is a good segue, Charles, thank you. Is that in the pie chart?
Yes, so contingency is shown in there.
It's shown as 1 million?
And then there's, the
Sorry, the 5% contingency is shown there, but the unallocated is not shown. So that's why that pie chart total is 429 million, where our revenue projection is 494 million.
Okay.
Yeah, so even if you look at the rainbow table with the inflated costs, we're still not at 494. We kept part of that money aside on top of the contingency.
I know maybe it's not the best thing to show that's unallocated, but I don't know. I don't know if that would be good to something to show in there, because that portion eventually is going to be put into another section. So for one section to automatically grow without a full pie chart, I don't know if that in there would be helpful to show that we do have that money set aside. The other thing is I know it says there's schedule changes, and then looking at the new projects don't have their schedule in there, like when they're planning on going through. Is that, I know the tables are already big as they are, and I don't know if that would fit in. But I think that's kind of a way to make sure that the people who are submitting projects are accountable to the dates that they're planning on, and that they're shovel ready. If they say that this project is going to be done in 2021 or 2022, and then next year it says, 2022, 2023, it would kind of show a history of maybe a project we ought to look a little closer into.
Yeah, so that timing is in the big rainbow table, but we can also look at trying to, in that table of the new approved projects, putting that timeline in there to help track it.
Okay, great.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
we asked that question about timing in the application process and in the contracting, and then we reflect that in, depending on when they say they're going to be ready and need the money, that's when we put them, those years in the rainbow table. So yeah, what Marcy said.
Yeah, no, and great job, Marcy. Thank you.
Anybody else? Jay, go ahead.
Not so much a question, but a comment to follow up on what Vinny's question was, and that is, although this pie chart that we're looking at does include the 5% contingency, you'll note on the table, I think it's 9.9B, that's with inflation, there's a projection of roughly $487 million of cost against our projection of $497 million in revenues. If you'll recall at our last meeting, we discussed and agreed to unallocate or hold back what we thought was going to be around $30 million in funding. So these tables actually demonstrate that number right now is only about 10 million. I did ask that question earlier this week of Virginia, and her response, and Virginia, you can amplify or correct if I state this wrong, but was that these costs are not necessarily, exact. So whereas we may be projecting 487, that may not actually be the number. So we don't really know how much we have, or it's impossible at this point to determine how much we have in unallocated funding, but it's not very much is the bottom line. So if and when future projects, desirable projects come up, it may be difficult, if not impossible, for us to approve funding for them. So I just wanted to make that apparent based on the discussion we'd had about this at our last meeting.
And one of the other things we talked about is doing as part of the 2021 update is we are starting to get some completed projects, so true up those costs and make sure those rainbow tables have the latest and greatest costs, and then try to, do our best guess inflating and estimating out. There is always the option, if the money's not available, to swap out some of the projects that aren't as cost effective in the plan for something else. So yeah, we'll need to start, as we move forward and we get more projects, we're going to get a little bit more limited on how much more we can add without removing something.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. I don't know, I guess it has to do with the plan, but maybe, year 5 or year 6 or year 7, we won't be sitting down looking at new projects. We'll be looking maybe at like project swaps, or, which projects are not ready to go, and we've got another project that's ready to go. So I think that for those that have been here for the first 4 or 5 years, it's maybe going to change now that we got all comfortable with the way the process went. But I have started thinking about that, and I'm sure staff has as well, Virginia, about how the years going forward is going to change without the revenue that we're used to having.
And just as a comment on your pie charts, I think it's important just to understand what we're trying to convey, and so candidly, I don't think they ought to be changed to reflect that unallocated funds, because we've got other tools where we're looking at dollar availability and how money's being spent, and in my mind, where this is presented in the report and what it's trying to convey are the decisions that we're making and the shifts between the types of technologies that we're investing in the lagoon, and dropping in money that's not being spent on anything but that will be spent in one of those categories doesn't help me with understanding how we've made decisions to shift between wastewater and muck, and so I actually kind of like it the way it is, and then use other tools to understand where there's money still remaining that's available to be unallocated.
I just thought it would give us the ability to kind of see where it could grow. I know that the money may not be there, or we may not be able to add more to sections that we wanted to, but if there was an area that showed, this is unallocated, then eventually when it grows, I don't know, I just felt it created a completer picture, but either way, I don't think it's something that needs to be there, per se.
Yeah, and I guess my comment to that would just simply be that if we need that type of information, I think it would be better using some additional tool rather than modifying this, so that we're able to use this tool for, I think, how it's presented in the report. And so if there's something where you want to do a bar chart that says here's allocated versus available funds, then you've got that to say here, we know what we're dealing with.
Thank you, guys. It doesn't look like we're advocating for any type of change to the draft plan. So we're going to be proceeding with a vote here on approving the draft plan in a moment.
We need to ask for public comment.
Oh, we will. We're not there yet. I just wanted to, Marcy, if you can stay up here real quick, I wanted to ask you a question. We don't see you very often. So I wanted to get your feedback before we proceed on voting. I wanted to get your thoughts on how the plan has adapted to bureaucracies and changes and projects that are completed and things like that. One of the reasons I wanted to ask you this question is I looked at that pie chart from the original plan to the 2020 draft, and the big change in muck removal, muck projects, and it was originally at 65%, now it's at 25%. And I just want to get your thoughts from, you guys had drafted the first plan with all of the available knowledge that was, around and about on the lagoon. Of course, now we have a body of evidence that's substantially larger. Just give us your thoughts on these changes and what you think that what your opinion of that is.
So when we first drafted the plan, I still think the reasoning behind it stands. We've learned over time that you can't just pick one source and solve the problem. In the 90s, it was all the wastewater, and that improved the lagoon to a point, and then that stopped. In the early 2000s, it was largely stormwater, and that helped to a point, and then that stopped. So really, when we built the plan originally, we were trying to see what types of sources were the problem and where, and try to tackle those most cost effectively. So we have made some shifts in that over time. Some of that would have happened without some of the political influence you mentioned, just because we are getting new data, what it actually costs to implement these projects, some more actual monitoring data on the projects. But I think as long as we try to keep a balance between each of all the project types, I think we're in a better spot than if we start weighing too heavily on one project over another.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Good answer. Good answer.
Can I add a statement to that as well? I'm an engineer, and I look at it, and when I first started on this committee, it's why the heck are we putting so many additional dollars into something that's not cost efficient? And I do think, I know from my own personal perspective, as well as watching kind of how this connects with the community, that the plan is incredibly good because of that balance. Because the reality is, every single thing in here is a contributor to the nutrient contamination in the lagoon. And at some point, we've got to address all of them. And so whether everything here is cost efficient or not, kind of maintaining that balance helps us also make that connection with people, because the reality is, this 10 years isn't going to do it. And so, 4 years from now or 5 years from now, we're going to be thinking about what's the next 10 years look like. And the number one thing we can do is have made progress and have continued to connect with the community to make sure there's confidence in the progress we're making. So I do really commend everybody involved, both the consultants and the staff, for kind of that insight. And I think that's really important, because it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about maintaining buy-in and commitment and excitement about the progress and continuing those connections.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. All right, so we have before us, we're going to be voting, somebody's going to motion on drafting or approving the draft 2020 plan. I wanted to invite the public really quick, if anybody wanted to speak on the plan, on the draft. Go ahead, come on up.
I filled out a card.
Oh, you did? Okay. No, I have it. Situations like this, I don't know if it's a final comment or something that's regarding the plan.
I want a comment about a change you might consider.
You must be Jim.
Yeah, Jim Glass, retired civil engineer. I'm a member of the Florida Fly Fishing Association. I kept a boat and fished out Honest John's Fish Camp for 20 years. When I moved here, the lagoon in that area was just full of seagrass. It was super. 5 years ago, the grass all died, and it hasn't come back yet. One of the things I wanted to ask you to consider, there are a lot of subdivisions in the South Beach area and along the mainland that are on septic tanks, that are on canals. I throw my anchor out, I pull up muck, I see that the plan includes, it did, I don't know whether this current plan does, but it included dredging muck out of Mullet Creek and Goat Creek. The houses that are on Goat Creek are all on septic tanks. Their houses all up and down the beach area where Honest John's is are on septic tanks. What's the source that's causing the nutrients to get in the lagoon that's causing the muck? And John, I know you know what I'm talking about. So how do we get rid of the source? Well, the county does not have a sewer plant on the South Beach area. One of the comments you made in the plan is that we can't do anything about the septic tanks that need to be removed because there's no sewage plant. I'd ask you to consider this. Put some money in the plan for the county to develop a plan to put a sewer plant in that area to get rid of those septic tanks, which is causing the pollution in the area. There's nothing being done down there. So I don't know whether you can do that or not. It's up to the county commission, I know, but if you guys make a recommendation, I hope they will listen to you. That was my main comment. Is there any questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. I have one more comment card. Lou, did you want to speak on behalf of the plan? Oh, okay. All right. All right. So moving forward, I think we're ready for a motion to accept the draft plan.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to accept the draft plan and forward it to the county commission for their consideration.
Second.
We have a second. Let's go ahead and proceed with a vote on approving the draft plan. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anybody opposed? All right. Fantastic. The draft plan.
I meant to
John,
add,
go ahead.
and if you need to make any changes that are editorial or whatever nature, you're free to do that. That's okay?
Thank you. I think the only thing we caught was actually something Jay pointed out. We had the name of table 9-9B as 8-9B. So we'll fix that typo.
But my motion meant to include that you have the freedom to make any changes.
And my second includes that as well.
And our votes all include that. Sure. Okay, thank you. All right, so that motion passes, and we've got the draft plan and the budget going to the county commission. Let's cross our fingers and hope for a good outcome. That's great news. It's a big vote, and I'm humbled and thankful to be able to contribute in that manner. Okay, so the only other active business we have is to accept general public comments. We only have one comment card. Mr. Lou Kotnick, if anybody else wants to speak, they can. Just let us know.
Chair, we have to vote.
I'm sorry?
We have
Hold
to do
on,
a roll
Lou.
call, don't we?
I'm sorry? Does it need to be a roll call vote?
It was unanimous.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't know what you
All
asked
right.
me.
No, you're right.
No,
that's what you,
And when will it go to the county commissioners next meeting? or-
So there's a requirement in the enabling ordinance that the plan that you recommend be posted online for 15 days for public comment before it can go to the board. So we won't be able to make their first February meeting. We'll plan to schedule it for the second February meeting. No, the second one is, I think it's the 25th. Sorry, I meant to have that handy.
Give the commission 2 more weeks. Get this thing
Yes, the
posted.
25th, that's a daytime meeting, so 9 a.m. on the
I didn't want to
25th.
make a
And
comment
at your previous, your December meeting, there was also a motion to recommend that the, support if the board wanted to look at mandating repairs to leaky laterals found through the smoke testing effort. So I'll be taking that recommendation from you forward in that same meeting, so it's all together. And then I just wanted to point out 2 other things. The table 9-8 that is now expanded to show every single project that has a name. We added a left-hand column that's project number. That project number is if that was a project submitted by the community to the committee that you then recommended, that is the number that you had, in 2017, 2018, 2019. That's where that number came from. We've had that request from multiple committee members over time. So if there's not a number assigned, that's because it was a project that was in the original plan So it didn't have a number, or it was a new project type that was like ribs and spray fields that was added in a previous year update with projects, so they weren't numbered. And then I also wanted to clarify on the Cape Canaveral wastewater treatment plant upgrades that are taken out of this plan update. We coordinated a tour of that facility to talk to the Air Force about improvements at that site. They, in the last, well, about a year ago, had actually implemented improvements at the site. And so then we went through a year's worth of data submitted to DEP to confirm that, in fact, the nutrient concentrations coming in that effluent are about half what they used to be. So I just wanted to provide that additional information on why that facility is no longer a cost-effective improvement, because they've already made the improvements, which is fantastic. I think that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. There'll be time for comments from us as well. Did you, Steph, did you have anything to add?
Well, I wanted to address what the gentleman.
What Jim?
Yes, what he just brought up to us. And I feel that while I didn't really feel like it was appropriate for us to make a change in the plan, I do think it's very appropriate for us to make a recommendation to the county commission that we would like for them to explore the possibility of putting in a sewer facility in the South Beaches, so that we have an option to be able to convert from septic to sewer. And I'm not sure, Virginia, how we would do that, but I think that it would be appropriate for us to make that recommendation as this committee.
It might be good to find out what they're doing first, because I know that their sewer utility director is doing a lot of planning right now. So I don't know, and I know the South Beaches plant now is slated for improvements, and I don't know if that would enable this or not. But that's I'd rather know what they're doing first before we make a motion, because I know he's doing a lot right now, and I don't want to.
Well, we could invite him to speak if he has something. I'd like to hear what's going on the South Beaches. It's kind of a long stretch.
Right. So I saw an early draft of the county commission is going to have a budget workshop in February, and utilities is going to be a big part of that workshop. And so I would expect there to be some conversation and potentially some direction on this at that meeting. So yeah, we could invite the utilities director to come back and give a report on where they're headed and what's being proposed.
And if there's nothing, why not, and what can the citizenry do about it? Okay.
Can we get the date of that workshop just so we can go or watch it? Is there
February 20th?
February 20th? Okay.
Is that something available to the public?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's 1 p.m. in the Florida room upstairs.
Jim, that might be something you want to attend? That meeting might be something you want to attend? Okay. John, go ahead.
I'm not sure. I thought maybe you were referring to that Jim was referring to a plant on the South mainland, not on the South.
South Beaches.
So, okay, all right.
South Beaches, a lot of subdivision on that.
All right, thank you.
I think it's easy for you to see that we all share your sentiment, so you're very welcome. Okay, so I think we're ready to proceed to any more public comments. I know we had Lou who got up. Oh, hold on. Oh, go ahead. Come on up. Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Monty Montgomery, a retired engineer here in Brevard County. After the last meeting, I did an independent review of the plan components, and I was really pleased to hear what was presented today. And Todd Swingle, is it? I'm glad you said what you said, because as an engineer who looked at it, systems engineer, it's developed into a very balanced plan. The attributes that are being addressed, I think, are appropriately now apportioned out among causal factors of impacts to our lagoon. So, and I mentioned that to Virginia also, is that the relative values of the funding and the efforts are importantly now distributed across the causal factors. And as a result, as we do these projects, we're also going to learn more about the individual constituents of nutrient pollution into our lagoon. So that was good. Also, Terry Castro is a friend of mine. I talked with him a lot about the same comments that you, David, and Jay, and others brought up about unallocated funds. And Vinny, I was glad you brought that up. I feel exactly the same way. As we go forward, there'll be a bucket of unallocated project money, or money that comes up, and the projects that may fit in there, but we'll then intersperse alternative projects in amongst those. So I believe it'll be like, I kind of feel the way you implied that over time that will balance itself out. I'm not sure. I do think a 5%, 20%, some number is appropriate to have unallocated, but I think that there'll be a battle for what funds are there in the out years, and that will take care of itself. But I did hear that was Terry's concern, is the unallocated funds. I heard that mentioned many times today. So I think that might solve itself just with some allocation, but others may feel the same way. But Vinny, I felt the same way about you. And I just wanted to mention that in relation to Todd Swingle's comment, it should be sold to the county commissioners as a very balanced spread of efforts across multi-variables that cause problems with our Indian River Lagoon. And that is what it's turned out to be. And I also feel personally that the balance, the values of those, that balance is appropriate for going forward for the next several years. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Mr. Kotnick.
Hi. Yeah, Lou Kotnick, Melbourne. And I want to echo the previous comments in terms of the balance of the plan and the process by which you get there. And also the importance of keeping the community aware and informed and enthusiastic about the efforts and the progress we're making. So along those lines, I wanted to share, again, I know it's been mentioned a couple of times, that the Brevard Indian River Lagoon Coalition is hosting our next Straight Talk event on Wednesday, this upcoming Wednesday, the 22nd, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Satellite High School Auditorium. And so you're all invited. I know you have your little brochures. Those of you watching, you're invited, and anybody who needs a flyer, glad to give you one. I also wanted to mention, well, we'll be having Dr. Dwayne DeFries, Virginia Barker, Frank Catano, and Courtney Barker there to answer questions. And that's really the focus of this. It is to give the community a brief introduction or a brief summary, but then to allow them to ask their questions so that we can keep and enhance that support. I also want to say that through the efforts of Fred May, a new board member with the coalition, we have tomorrow on Channel 9 at 12:30 a half-hour interview going on the TV related to the Straight Talk. And it includes, I think, MJ Water, Dwayne DeFries, Courtney, I think maybe you're part of it as well. I'm not sure. No, you're not. Okay. In any case, so getting on TV, which I think is real important. And then today there are a series of spots on Channel 13 about the events and about Straight Talk. So look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.
It's got a lot of exposure. I've seen it in several different media outlets, so your attendance probably should be, let's hope it's better than the survey. So, but I think it will be.
Good.
It will be.
Well, and thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Oh, whoops. Channel 9 is Sunday, not tomorrow.
Okay. Are there any other public comments by the committee?
Wait, by the committee, public comment?
Oh, well, do we have any more public comments? No. Any committee comments?
I just had one thing, I'm sorry, because I can't talk to Todd outside this meeting. Todd, I do enjoy our discussions back and forth because we are often on different, maybe not often, but I think what you pointed out is that the contingency number is now wrong. And the contingency number wasn't in the original plan. So I'm good with the plan going forward the way it is. I'm just thinking maybe next year, if we don't have the contingency number in there, or we put the number that we actually decided, I just think it would be more accurate for the data. That was one thing. And then the other thing, I know we didn't get a chance to last month, Virginia, but I know there's information that comes to us. Like we had a presentation about the grass, the seagrass, and where it was going, and then there were projects in the plan that were talking about seagrass. And I'm sure, I just wanted to mention, but I would hope that your staff, and I think they probably are making sure that the information that we're learning is then disseminated to somebody who's making a project about that, just so we can make sure that all the information that we're getting in the new science then goes to somebody who's applied for a project. Because I just think that the county, your department would be a good resource to have that information and give it out to those that are making the difference.
Laura Lee, did you have a comment?
Yeah, okay, I have two now, based on what Vinny just said. Vinny, there are some projects in the National Estuary, IRL National Estuary Program. 3 different projects have a seagrass planting component in them. And then I think one or two of the projects that the tourism, Lagoon and tourism grant money also had some seagrass planting elements. So there, and let's see, one of the NEP projects is 100% total big seagrass planting project by the Walmart in Sykes Creek. So there are people that are working on it, and hopefully we'll have some good results. And then my other comment, it really doesn't have anything to do with the project plan, but you want excitement. This is exciting. So we had the horseshoe crab, we started doing horseshoe crab surveys here last year. Last year was the first year that they've been done on the east coast of Florida. And so we had our first, our training session a couple days ago. And I found out at that training session from the FWC biologists and the horseshoe crab researchers from University of Florida, the southeast side, that little cove at the southeast corner of the Titusville Causeway, it is the most significant horseshoe crab nesting area in the entire state. They said that there is no other place in the whole state of Florida that comes close to seeing the numbers of horseshoe crabs that spawn in that area. So I think it has something to do with the alignment of the Titusville Causeway. It's a northeast-southwest alignment. It's the only causeway, I think, on the whole east coast of Florida that has a northeast-southwest alignment as opposed to a straight east-west alignment. And so what happens when the wind blows out of the south, the water piles up in that cove, and it must create mega optimal opportunities for horseshoe crabs to spawn, because they come there by the thousands. So I just wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Melissa.
I have 2 semi-quick things too. One is that I would love to know and understand more about how other agencies are working on lagoon restoration issues for our purposes. And in the military, we call it the common operating picture. And it's something that is, I think, valuable for us because I think it helps to further define our priority of efforts and therefore our funds. For instance, if the water management district is better equipped to do the muck dredging project, things like that. So it's an overall request for some insight. Maybe I don't want to create work, but I would like to understand just basically what you probably already know every once in a while, to know what the IRL NEP folks are doing, what various and sundry agencies and organizations are doing in the lagoon. In addition to what we should know, what the public should know in the education efforts that we have. It's not just us, is the bottom line, and they should know what all is going on. And I would love to be well equipped and informed to relay that information. And the second thing is that today is Florida's Arbor Day. And I thought it would be a nice note to emphasize the fact that we should as a community, understand the value of trees and land use issues as it relates to our lagoon as well. Something that we can hopefully develop in our education material. Thank you.
Virginia, I have a question real quick on our presentation allocations for the year. Is it filled or is it open? Is it, what kind of availability do we have?
For presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've got this sort of running list going with the concept that you would provide ideas like you're doing right now. So at the end of the progress report, there's 17 topics there, and so as you provide these ideas, I add them to that list, and then we try to figure out who's a good speaker and who's available, and try not to overload your schedule, because
I was thinking
so much great stuff to.
I was thinking and I don't know the answer to this, but if there's a broad swath of organizations planting and managing seagrass, the nurseries and all that, maybe that's somebody in your department could just put together a brief presentation on the collective on seagrass, what's happening, and then also with Melissa's suggestion, it's been a while since MRC has spoken officially, or the coalition has spoken. So maybe this year, sometime this year, we get them to speak to us. I know when the report card comes out, Dr. Soto will speak on that, but maybe it's it's something for us to include, because it has been I think a couple of years since we've gotten a kind of a comprehensive update from the coalition in our meeting. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think that would go towards Melissa's concern. So, are there any other comments, Charlie?
Yeah. So also this week coming up, we have the best and probably the biggest birding and wildlife festival in the United States. So that starts Wednesday, and one of the reasons we get thousands of people to come here for the festival is because of the Indian River Lagoon and because of the various habitats that it provides. So I'd hope that all our members of the board here get to go visit if you don't participate in one of the many field trips. And I'd also encourage our county commissioners and their staff to attend, because it is an economic engine.
It is.
And it's been going on
for a big event.
23
years, and it's sustained. And if you haven't been to it, it's just wonderful to just walk through the exhibit area at Eastern Florida State College North Campus.
I love birders and I love bird watching, and I'll be the first to admit we're all a bunch of kooks. It's kind of crazy, the love affair we have with looking at and observing birds. It's crazy. Okay, anything else? All right, I think we're all set then. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, guys. Thank everybody for coming today. Appreciate it.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.